record the session now, so all the content is recorded. So Maria has been successfully teaching all levels of Spanish, including the AP Spanish language and literacy courses to native, heritage, as well as non-Spanish speaking students for 16 years at the New York City public schools. She has worked extensively developing AP Spanish language and culture curriculum, and she has been writing day-to-day lesson plans for the AP for All initiatives. Maria is also a host and facilitator of citywide lab classroom visitation and also for the AP for All. Maria is currently working with DOE's Office of Multilingual Learners, developing curriculum and lesson plans for heritage speakers of Spanish to be utilized by NYC teachers. She is heavily involved in the implementation of New York State Seal of Biliteracy for graduating seniors and actively promulgates implementation of the New York State standards for world languages. Ms. Quintana is a firm believer in a student-centered classroom, eliciting the unique qualities of each student in order to create a comfortable and safe learning environment. And yes, Maria, I'm gonna pass my
Thank
torch to
you. Thank you.
you.
Thank you. I'm going to share. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being here, sharing this hour with us. I'm going to share the presentation and then we'll get started. And just let me know if you can see it. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the 3 P's of culture, and we're going to focus specifically on standard 4, but we'll touch upon all the standards. So I think it's hopefully you can take something to the classroom, maybe even tomorrow. Okay, so as a reminder, right, we're focusing on all the standards, the standards that we're working here in New York State. And as I mentioned, we're going to be working through all the standards. We have an emphasis on standard 4, but you'll see how this presentation kind of touches upon every standard. Okay, so we are hopefully walking away with 3 main objectives. Obviously, we want to engage in the 3 P's of culture as part of the culturally responsive sustaining education framework. Then we're going to explore standard 4 together, and then we're going to hopefully, if we have time, well, I'm going to share ideas for checkpoint A, checkpoint B, and checkpoint C. And hopefully we'll have some time to also share ideas. I may have to truncate some of the things as an hour may not be enough, but you'll get the point, and you're going to get all these resources at the end of the conference. Okay, so most of us already know about the New York State culturally relevant and sustaining education framework. Basically, what I want us to take from it is that we want to see students' language, home language, right, as assets for teaching and learning. It's kind of like one of the main things. And the framework has 4 principles, but in this presentation, we're going to touch upon 3 of the principles. The first one is, as we all do, it's just that maybe we call it differently, but we're creating a welcoming and affirming environment. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds to read this on your own, right? And putting a special emphasis on what's highlighted in yellow, because our presentation is anchored on this. Okay. Okay, so we want to celebrate, we want to have an environment where all culturalities and cultural identities, and that they see themselves reflected in our curriculum. The principle 2 is high expectations and rigorous instruction. We want to make sure that we're challenging our students intellectually and that we're teaching them critical reasoning so that they don't believe everything that they read on the internet, right? That's also part of the framework. And one of the most important things for me about principle 2 is we want to send messages that encourage positive self-image and empower themselves and others to succeed. Okay. And the third principle is identify an inclusive curriculum, and assessment. So we want to elevate historically marginalized voices, and we want to learn about perspectives beyond our own scope, beyond our own family, beyond our local community, beyond New York City. And our aim is always to dismantle systems of biases. Okay, with that in mind, we're going to get started, and obviously you'll ask any questions. We're going to answer them at the end, if that's okay. Okay, so most of us already know about the 3 P's of culture, and if you don't, you've come to the right place to talk about it, about them. This is a deep view of culture is what we do in our classes, right? We are talking about food, music, language, the flags of each country. That could be like the surface, right? Those are products, what we see. They could be tangible or intangible. And then the deeper culture is where we go to practices of the culture and the perspectives. When I present this to my students, this I'm touching upon standard 1 and standard 4 when I'm presenting it to the students. I like this one also a lot more. And this would be standard 1 because the students are interpreting what I'm presenting to them, but also they're relating a little bit to products, practice, and perspectives, right? So we have the products is tangible or intangible creations of a particular culture. Then we have the prácticas is what people do, the behaviors in that culture. What do they do and where? What do they do? What they celebrate, right? How they celebrate. And the most deepest, almost difficult to get to is the perspective, because we don't want to fall into stereotypes, right? So teaching the perspective is perhaps one of the most difficult in my case, I've found. Perspectives is, or why do the people in that culture celebrate the way they do? Why is it important to them, right? And we're going to go through a number of examples, and then we're going to focus on one big example so that we can replicate this in our classrooms with different traditions, not necessarily the ones that I'm going to present to you today. So this is another way that I present to my students, keeping in mind that I have different learning styles. So maybe this image doesn't make sense to one of my students, but if I do this color-coded, and then I just put words and I tell them again, look, the products are things, artifacts like food, clothing, the flag, and then the practices is what people do, their celebrations, and then the green is why. Why is it important for people to celebrate? So I'm touching upon standard 1 because the students are interpreting what I'm teaching, and I'm also touching upon standard 4 because they're relating already what products, practices, and perspectives are, right? And I always tell my students that in order to understand the culture of any other country, we must understand the people of the country. And in order to understand the people, we have to understand products, practices, and perspectives. Okay? All right. Here's another way that I present products to my students, right? Input. It's more input, standard 1. Here's another way that I present to my students practices in different countries or cultures. Here's another way that I present perspectives. Now, why do we celebrate Day of the Dead? Why is it important? Not that we celebrate it in some countries, but why, right? So this is another way that I teach my students products, practices, and perspectives. So what we're going to do today, I wish if you have a piece of paper around you and a pen, that would be great. And if not, I guess you can create it on your cell phone. As long as you have a piece of paper or a document, that's fine. We are going to be working with 2 traditions of Latin America. I'm a Spanish teacher, so you'll see towards the end of the presentation that you can do different traditions or celebrations, not necessarily only Spanish-speaking ones. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with 2 traditions of Latin America. One is called the Day of the Dead, and one is called All Saints Day. So we're going to start with the Day of the Dead. Okay, so if you can visualize this chart, the first thing we're going to do is you're going to choose a practice of the Day of the Dead. Then you're going to come up with products of the Day of the Dead, and then explain the perspective, right? So here's some information about the Day of the Dead, right? It's a Mexican celebration, but also some countries in Central America. I'm giving you input. This is standard 1, right? And I may not have enough time to go through everything that I want to show because I want time for questions, but I'm just teaching my students about the Day of the Dead. right? Teaching my students about the Day of the Dead. And I'm not teaching you, but like I want you to start thinking of this because we're going to do an activity in a breakout room. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. So start gathering some information about the Day of the Dead. This is some of the things that they do. These are some of the products that we would see during the Day of the Dead. And here's some more information about La Catrina for the Day of the Dead in Mexico. Here's more input. Here's more input for products of the Day of the Dead. This would be standard one. Here's more input about some of the products that we will see during this tradition, right? Here's more, more input, more input. And I chose the Day of the Dead because well, in the United States, most of us know about the tradition. And I'm going to play a short video. Okay, so if you have headphones, watch out. It may be a little too loud. I don't know. I hope not. And it's in Spanish, but I just want you to pick one thing that you see people doing. So I just went over the products, and now I'd like you to see and focus on one thing that people do. So we're focusing on the practice. I may not play the whole video, but let me know if you can hear it, okay?
Día de
Sorry.
Muertos en México. Las 2 últimas semanas de octubre, las calles de mi ciudad se llenan de flores de color naranja. Todo huele a cempasúchil, flor de muertos,
Let me see if I can find subtitles there. Oh,
a chocolate, a figuritas de azúcar y a pan de muerto. El humo del copal purifica el aire. El 2 de noviembre es el Día de Muertos. Los mercados preparan una gran celebración y en todas las calles hay vendedores de flores porque el Día de Muertos es alegre. Las tiendas se llenan de unos esqueletos de azúcar pintados que se llaman catrinas. Los dulces tienen forma de calavera. Estos días estamos alegres porque el 2 de noviembre es motivo de fiesta y diversión, pero también estamos tristes porque recordamos a las personas que ya no están con nosotros. En estos ritos, las calaveras eran un elemento fundamental. Pero también se llaman calaveras a unos poemas divertidos que se dedican unas personas a otras. Los lectores pueden publicar sus calaveras en los periódicos. Según la tradición, el alma de las personas que han muerto vuelve a visitar a su familia el Día de Muertos. Por eso, los mexicanos esperan su visita con todo lo que le gustaba al difunto. Construyen un altar lleno de flores y en él le dejan cigarrillos, chocolate, dulces, tamales, caldos y también tequila.
okay, I'm going to stop it here for purposes. So basically, you saw some things that they do, right? Some things that people do as practice in Mexico during the Day of the Dead, right? And you may know other things that you didn't see on the video. When I teach this to my students, I want the practice to come from the video that I've chosen, okay? Okay, so we're going to continue with the presentation now, and we'll get ready for a breakout room. During the breakout room, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things, right? Everybody picked a practice of the short video that I showed, or perhaps you already have an idea of what a practice is in Mexico during the Day of the Dead. So I'd like for you to agree on a practice because maybe, I don't know, one person picked that they go to the cemetery at night, another person picked that they do an altar, another person picked that they celebrate, agree on a practice, then come up with some products based on the input that we had at the beginning, right? Like the flower of the dead, like the bread of the dead, all these different products that we went over, albeit a bit fast. And then see if you can come up why the practice that you chose is important to the people in Mexico who celebrate the Day of the Dead. Right? So when you're doing your breakout rooms, we're hitting on standard 1 because you're interpreting the instructions that we give the students. We're hitting on standard 2 because the students in our classrooms are going to be talking to each other. So that's interpersonal communication. Then when we come back from the breakout rooms, we're going to ask someone to present to us what was it that you guys discussed. So that's standard 3. Then standard 4, we're relating to products, practices, and perspectives. Yes. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to ask that you guys give me a thumbs up with your with the emojis to see if you know what we're going to do in the breakout rooms. You're going to agree on a practice. Then you're going to come up with 3 or 4 products. And then you're going to see if you can come up with the perspective. Why do people in Mexico go to the cemetery during the Day of the Dead? Why do they create, what is the belief behind an altar during the Day of the Dead? Yes. So if you can just show me and I'm going to, okay, I see one person understands what we're going to do in breakout rooms. Everybody else, okay, you got that? Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure because if you don't know what we're going to be doing in the breakout room, then I want to make sure that we clarify. Okay. Everyone else? Okay, great. So we're going to split up for about 5 minutes in So that's a good question, Karina. And when I teach this lesson, I want it to come from the video. And if it's a heritage speakers class, that's a different idea. But yeah, I'm going to say for checkpoint A, yes, I'd like the students. I'm going to show you how I do it for checkpoint A in a minute. But from you guys, because we didn't get to see the entire video so that we can have some time to do standard 2, interpersonal communication, you can come up with the perspective, yeah, and not necessarily in the video since we didn't see the entire video, yeah. All right, so we're gonna go into breakout rooms for 5 minutes and let me know if you have any questions and let's try it up. Let's try. Let's see how let's stumble through this. See how it goes.
Welcome back.
Is everybody back? I can't really tell.
I think they are coming back.
Oh, they're coming back. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Muy poco tiempo.
I know, but you'll give your students more time, of course. This is just so that you know how kind of like how we do it. But no, estoy de acuerdo. Totalmente, Ángela. ¿Cómo estás? Okay, so it looks like everyone is back. And again, we're touching upon all 4 standards.
So really easy non-factor. I don't want y'all to ruin this.
Okay, so we are going to do standard 3, presentational mode, where I'm just gonna ask one person to share what was the practice that they discussed, 3 or 4 products of the practice, and then why is that practice important for the people in Mexico who celebrate Day of the Dead. Yes? Okay, so we need one volunteer to tell us.
Hola, María. Es Luz.
Hi. Okay,
Hola,
share
señorita.
with us.
Okay, so we picked ofrendas, the altar.
Okay, yes, that's a practice. Is that a product? Is that a product or a practice?
We picked the practice.
Well, the practice should be then people create an ofrenda.
Okay. Oh, okay. So you want in complete sentences.
No. I just mean because ofrenda could also be a product.
Right. So we did put it in. Okay. So we put it on both because it wasn't sure.
Yeah. So the ofrenda is a practice where people set up an ofrenda for the day. So that's the practice. Okay.
Okay.
What is some products?
We put candles, pictures, the flowers, the Catrina.
Yep.
We put those as the products.
Tequila.
The one that you don't forget. And then the last one we said is to honor their loved ones and to do religious perspectives.
Yes. And yes, so that's like the most meaningful part. Also, just in case other teams or groups got to talk a little bit more about it, through the ofrenda, they believe that because the soul is this is the only night that the soul can come to the world of the living, that they get to eat and, be refreshed with whatever they used to like when they were alive. That's more perspective for this particular practice. Okay, let me see how we're doing on time. Thank you so much, Luz. So we have the ofrenda, like people put up an ofrenda. Did anybody else come up with the practice that they go to the cemetery at night? Melinda? No. Okay. Who came up with?
We did the sugar skull.
Oh, the sugar skull is a product.
Yes.
So sugar skull is not a practice. So the sugar skull will be a product. But if you say during the Day of the Dead, children eat or people eat sugar skulls, then that would be a practice. And then the sugar skull will become a product. And then the perspective will be something else.
What is
So I
the
have a
difference?
question. Would making the sugar skulls be a practice?
Yeah,
Because
that
in the
could be a
video there was-
practice. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. Did anyone come up with the one that the practice that people go to the cemetery? Carla?
Hi, we talked about the practice of making a path of cempasúchil from the tomb
Yeah.
to the altar in the family's home.
That was not on the video, everybody, but yes, that's a practice in Mexico. And what are some of the products?
Cempasúchil,
The flower.
flores,
Yes.
flowers, tombstone, the altar.
Yeah.
And then the perspective is that the flowers guide the souls of the departed back to their family's altar where they can be with the families.
Because
and
it's the
partake
only
on that
night.
day.
Because it's
Yeah.
the only night that their soul can come to the world of the living. Okay. So so these are some of the things that you would do with our students, right? We would give them input. They would interpret the input where you will describe the tradition or the celebration. You would give them products and we would give them input. Then they can work together, and that's standard 2, really, interpersonal communication. They're talking to each other. Then you ask them to present. So then that's standard 3, and they're already relating to products, practices, and perspectives, which is standard 4. So far, so good, right? But this is, let me see, how I would do it, or for a checkpoint A, right? So in this case, I would provide the students in checkpoint A with a practice. I wouldn't make them choose it. I would tell them, they're checkpoint A. Here's the practice, one of the practices of the Day of the Dead that we're going to focus on today. The products, checkpoint A, students can come up with it because it's just a list of words. It's more like vocabulary words. And then for the perspective, you choose. You choose what the perspective is, and the students would choose the correct one. Look at this. Let me see. Here, right? I give them a practice. People go to the cemetery at night. We give that to them in checkpoint A. The students on their own make a list of products because they can, because it's checkpoint A, vocab. And then as checkpoint A students, let's say first year, you give them the choices and they have to pick which of these two is the correct perspective. If you're a checkpoint B teacher, right, then you provide a list of practices. Then the kids can come up with their products on their own, and then they can also come up with the perspective in very simple tense sentences, right? They already know cognates, and if they use the present tense, maybe in checkpoint B, they're already getting into the, preterite and imperfect tenses, right? Here is an example. Here are 1, 2, 3 practices that we give them as a teacher, right? And they pick the one that they want to focus on. They come up with a list of products, and they also come up with the perspective at a checkpoint B. Checkpoint C, which could be your heritage speakers or an AP class, they choose the practice, just like we did here today. They come up with the products, just like we did here today, and they come up with the perspective, just like we did here today, right? Okay, so now I want us to go to another presentation. Now, I'll do this with my students depending on how often do you see them. I see my students for 90 minutes, so I get to do a lot with them, but some of us only have 45 minutes, right? So you can do one practice one day, you can break it down into 3 different lessons, however you want to go about it, right? And then here is another celebration that is going to take us to checkpoint 5, to standard 5. Okay, so again, I'm going to ask you to to maybe if you have a piece of paper or your phone, or just I'm going to show you something about All Saints Day. Okay, it's a different tradition. Well, sorta. Okay, All Saints Day takes place in Guatemala. Okay, standard one, right? We're telling students input, standard one. So this is a tradition that takes place in a city called Zumpango, in the cemetery of Zumpango in Guatemala. So not everybody in Guatemala does this tradition or celebrates this tradition, but it's a tradition of the giant kites during All Saints Day. Okay, standard one, input for our students. The Zumpango Festival, also known as the Giant Kite Festival, is a cultural event held on November 1st. In the town of Zumpango, yes?
I'm sorry, I was trying to raise my hands, but I don't see that I have
Just
that.
write the question on the chat. We'll get to them.
Okay.
We promise. Yeah, at the end. Yes. Thank you, Chani. And so this is a celebration. They celebrate in a special town in Guatemala on All Saints Day. Okay, people gather in the soccer field right next to the cemetery. Then they have a big contest of enormous kites. And each kite takes a long time to get it done because they're like 19 meters diameter. They're really, really big. Again, this is standard one that we're telling our students. So I'm going to tell our students to watch a video. That's also standard one. And why do they think it's important for people of Guatemala to fly the kites? What is the perspective? Okay. There's also a reading that you can do with your students. I translated for you. It's in English and in Spanish, so you can use it if you want. But I want you guys to focus on the perspective, right? I already told you the practice. They fly giant kites. Okay. So here is the video that is shorter and it's in English. So here we go.
We can hear it.
Festival de Barriletes Gigantes, or the Festival of Giant Kites, is one of the oldest and most important celebrations in Guatemala. Small town of Zumpango, the locals create giant kites to be displayed in a massive celebration on All Saints Day. Their colorful creations line the horizon as thousands of spectators come to appreciate their beauty. All over Guatemala, you will see people flying kites on All Saints Day. The tradition dates back to the ancient Mayans, who believed that flying kites could allow one to commune with their deceased loved ones. Similar to Day of the Dead traditions in Mexico, flying kites on All Saints Day in Guatemala is when families look to the skies to connect with loved ones who have moved on to the next world. In Zumpango, this tradition is taken to its most extreme. The souls of the departed, the people of Zumpango believe, are soothed by the colorful displays, and bad spirits are kept away. This tradition eventually grew into the massive event that it is today, that attracts thousands of people from all over Guatemala and beyond. Artisans work for months on the intricate kites, made entirely out of paper mache. It takes teams of up to a dozen people to secure and lift the kites into position.
Oh my God, stop.
Designs usually reflect themes of life, death, as well as the beliefs and issues Mayan people hold dear. While the giant kites themselves are too large to fly, teams of kite flyers will hoist smaller ones into the sky. Eventually, the entire sky will be filled with kites, welcoming in the souls and spirits of the deceased to come revel with loved ones in the land of the living. It is an incredibly beautiful tradition and one I was thankful to take part in this year.
Okay. Okay, so hopefully you were able to get some perspective. Normally in the classroom, I would show the students maybe twice the video. On the AP exam, the AP Spanish exams, they play the audio twice for the students. So I don't see anything wrong with playing the video twice to our students so they can get the perspective, especially if you know that this may be a new tradition for your students. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing that we did, but this time with the giant kites tradition of All Saints Day in Guatemala. So I think we understand what we're doing now. You choose a practice, right? What people do. Then you choose products, tangible or intangible products that people do create. And then why do you think this practice is so important? That would be the perspective. Yes? Okay, so let's go back to breakout rooms. We're going to have 5 minutes again and open them up.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Ya nos sacaron.
Okay, yes, sorry. Okay, so again, we're gonna have time for one person, one group to share. And again, we're focusing right now on standard 3, right? Because we're presenting the work that we did together. Interpersonal communication. So can someone just there was just, I think just one practice, to be honest, right? The flying of the kites. But what were some of the products? And before we get to that, I want to also say that this is a wonderful opportunity to explain and to teach our students, right? That the word for kite in Spanish, I'm a Spanish teacher. The word for kite in Spanish has so many, we all say it in different ways, right? In Spain, we'll call it one thing. In the Dominican Republic, they call it another thing. In Venezuela, they call it another thing. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us as Spanish teachers to explore the pluralism that we have, right? So that's one thing. And I also wanted to clarify that a practice is what people do. And then the products are things that you can touch, right? But also the law could be a product of a culture, right? The law that if you, I don't know, a law that if you, whatever, a law could also be a product, okay? Practice is what people do. So people in Zumpango, Guatemala, build giant kites, enormous kites on the day of the All Saints Day. So can someone tell us what are some products and what is the perspective? Okay, Kevin? You can unmute yourself, Kevin.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
So my group and I, the product that we chose was the kite. I'm from
Yeah.
Colombia, so we call it cometas.
Yeah.
And I love seeing the different variation that in the chat that people are saying, chiringa, chichigua,
Definitely.
papalote. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So that is the product, la cometa,
But
the kite.
the kite, yes.
The kite, yep. And then the practice would be the flying of the kite.
Yes.
And the perspective or the belief around that is that if you are flying the kite, it is as if you are flying with the spirits that have passed away or the spirits that have already passed. Based on the video, that's somewhat what I understood of that.
Yeah, and
So it's like a connection with the dead.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And the reading that you're going to get as well, you're going to get this whole presentation with the videos, and there's a reading, and in the reading, it's a different perspective, but it just means that it's such an old, ancient tradition since the Mayans, right, that we don't really know, but really, yes, thank you so much. The tradition, the belief is that if they fly the kites, this is one way to connect with their dead ones and their loved ones. When you do the reading, you'll see that they believe that whenever they went to the cemetery, the evil spirits were not letting the dead ones rest in peace. So, but we didn't do the reading, so it's okay. But when you do the reading, you see that the evil spirits were not letting the dead ones, the loved ones, rest in peace. So they built the kites, and the noise of the paper with the wind will scare the spirits away. But you'll get that from the reading. When we're teaching this to our students, we want to make sure we give them enough input, right? Because we'll have more time so that they can get this perspective. So again, right? If you're teaching checkpoint A, you give them the practice, You give them the practice. Well, in this case, there's only one practice. They can come up with a list of products. Well, you could have said the glue, you could have said the bamboo sticks, right? The paper for the kite. That's more vocab for our checkpoint A students. And then the perspective, where they can choose A, B, or C. Because at checkpoint A, they may not have enough language yet to express it in a full sentence, or maybe your students can. In that case, then they don't need to choose, right? Here are some, they want to remember their dead ones. They believe that the soul of their loved ones will come to the world of the living on this night. They believe that the noise of the paper. So which one of those three are the perspective? That is for checkpoint A. Let's say you teach checkpoint B. If you teach checkpoint B, just like the same thing that we did with the Day of the Dead, right? The same thing. You give them the practice. They build giant kites. They adorn kites with social political messages. Those are two different practices, right? And then they can come up with the perspective. And if they're checkpoint C or heritage speakers or an AP class, then they can do the same thing we did here today, where they figure out the practice, they come up with the products, and they come up with the perspective, right? So checkpoint A, we give them the practice, and then we give them to choose. Is it perspective A, B, C? Yes, the products they can do on their own. If it's checkpoint B, then we give them a choice of practices and they come up with the perspective on their own. And if they're checkpoint C or heritage speakers, they can come up with everything on their own, just kind of like what we did it here today. Yes, but I also want to, we have some time. Okay, so let's say now that you want to take it to standard 5 because you're a fantastic student, a teacher, and your students are great also, and you time this really well. This may take you a week, right? Where you do one tradition 2 days, the other tradition the other 2 days, and then another day you can do where they do standard 5, whereas they do cultural comparisons, and where they will compare, right, what they learned about the Day of the Dead and what they learned about Day of All Saints Day in Guatemala, right? And then they'll do that. I did this with my checkpoint B students, but you can definitely do this with an AP class or a heritage speakers class. And when they start doing a comparison, I give them a format because it's their first time talking, let's say checkpoint B, right? Or even checkpoint A, depending on how your students well. So I give them a format for them to get ready because they already know now, right? What happened in the Day of the Dead tradition? What happened in All Saints Day in Guatemala? And of course, let me just say that this could be any tradition, right? So if you want to compare how they celebrate Mother's Day in Haiti and Mother's Day in the United States, there are a few differences. Like if in Haiti, if your mother has passed away, you wear a white rose on your chest on Mother's Day. If your mother's still alive, you wear a different color. That's a tradition, right? Or let's say you want to talk about Carnival and you want to compare Carnaval with Mardi Gras, right? It could be any tradition. So the students already know the products, the practices, and perspectives of one tradition, and then they do the other one. In our case, and for our presentation, we're talking about Day of the Dead in Mexico and Day of All Saints Day in Guatemala. But then you can say to me, some of my students said, I'm not from Guatemala and I'm not from Mexico. We don't celebrate the Day of the Dead, which is a valid question. And for this, I tell the students, okay, well, think about how you honor your grandmother if she's passed away in your family. Do you cook her recipe for Christmas? Do you cook her favorite recipe for, I don't know, your birthday? Do you have a picture of your grandfather? I know I have a picture of my father in my apartment, right? To celebrate the dead ones. And then we can say that, well, this is how we honor the dead ones in my family. This is how we honor the people who've passed away. So we don't celebrate Day of the Dead. We don't celebrate All Saints Day. But I've had students from South America, in Bolivia, they have a Day of the Dead that is different, right? So if you want to research that, you can also go ahead and find out how they celebrate. Every culture honors their dead. Every culture honors their dead, their family, their ancestors. So it's not only a Spanish tradition, right? It could be in Japan. It could be in Spain. Well, Spain is Spanish. It could be in any country, how they honor their loved ones, right? And then I let them practice. Okay, they're gonna record on their phone and they're gonna send it to me via email so I can hear them. Okay, so they're going to practice after they have time to do all of this. We have, okay, I'm gonna save 3 more minutes. They go over how they're gonna present their comparison. Then they share. I give them, okay, you're gonna have 5 seconds to present, to share with your partner what you're gonna say before we start recording. And then, okay, so what are you gonna say about the 3 Ps of the Day of the Dead? And they practice that with a classmate. That's standard, standard tool, interpersonal communication. They're talking to each other. Okay, and then how are you gonna do Guatemala? What are you gonna tell? How are you gonna record yourself when you're doing this? Okay, what are you gonna say? And then how you honor the dead in your family. You have 20 seconds for that. And then they practice, and then they do how they will end their conversation or their presentation. And then we record ourselves all at the same time. Why? Because on the AP exam, the students will be recording themselves all at the same time. So even if it's, I don't know, checkpoint A, if you just want the students to record for 15 seconds. If it's checkpoint B, you want the students to record for maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Or if it's checkpoint C, you want them to record themselves for 2 minutes. I have 2 heritage speakers recordings that I cannot share because of FERPA and confidentiality issues, but one of them was Colombian, 2nd generation, and one is Mexico, 1st generation. And somebody may say to me, yeah, but this kid already knew everything about Mexico. He was Mexican, but he didn't know how they celebrated in Guatemala, so he learned something else besides his own traditions, right? So everything that we can teach our students where they get to compare, then that's it's good for our standards because they're interacting with other cultures. And when they present themselves via recording, that's standard 3. So we are basically hitting all the standards on this presentation. And if you have AP Spanish students, then you can just use the guidelines that the College Board gives you. Yeah. So we don't have a lot of time, but I wonder if you can just start thinking of which activity will you implement in your classroom? What kind of support would you need for this kind of activity? And what other ideas came up for you as, that you can do for the 3 Ps of culture, okay? You will get all of these resources, okay? And this is my email, just in case you want to get a hold of me and ask me some questions. For now, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to see if there are some questions that some people may have. It was that fabulous? No questions? I'm kidding. Oh, Kevin, you have a question. Your hand is up.
Hi, yes, not really a question, but just a reflection. During one of the discussions on like the Dia de los Muertos, one of our group members actually shared what her experience is in her culture. She is of Korean background, so she
Yes.
shared how she honors the dead in her family or in her culture, and there were some similarities, but also some differences. So it was, just naturally people want to share and compare
Yes.
the cultural practices,
Yes.
which is
So
very
there you have it. So like I said, every culture honors their dead, their ancestors, and not every culture, or even in the Spanish-speaking world, we don't all celebrate Day of the Dead, right? We're not all from Mexico. But how wonderful is it for us to learn about another person's culture, and then we can learn the culture based on the 3 Ps of culture, right? So thank you, Kevin, for that input. Any other questions? I saw that there was a question in the chat about the difference between product and practice. Does anybody still have that question, or is it clear?
It's clear.
Adriana, you have a question?
Yes. So for checkpoint A, would they just be recording themselves making the list of products?
Yes. So you can just do that, make a list of products, or depending in checkpoint A, like if you do this in the 2nd semester that we're about to start, right? You can say that they can probably by now still do simple sentences, and if they can describe something, if that's one of your can-do statements, they can record. You don't have to record yourself because they already did presentation, interpersonal communication when they were discussing in their teams before they came up with sharing products, practices, and perspectives in the classroom. But if you want to take it to the next level, because every Spanish 1 student is a potential AP Spanish student. So if you want to get them in the habit of recording, go for it. I tell my students, we're all going to record at the same time. That way, when Adriana is talking, then Kevin is also talking. So Kevin doesn't have time to hear what Adriana is saying because they get, self-aware of their Spanish. So that's why we also do it at the same time. Carla, do you have a question?
Yes, hi, thank you. Regarding recording at the same time, I found that students struggle with like the background noise of hearing other people, talking at the same time and that their voice is coming out in their recording. Is there a way around that?
Yeah, of course. You can have them if you want and you trust your students. I'm sure you do. I mean, their voices. They can record at home if they want. That's also fine. I would do the practice. The first time we speak, I say, whisper it. Whisper it. Don't just think it because we think faster than, when we speak. So whisper it. Whisper what you're going to say. Whisper. And then you time yourself. And then they can record themselves at home, of course. But checkpoint C, I don't. They have to do it in the classroom because that's what's going to happen on the AP exam, checkpoint B or a heritage class, of course. They have to do it on the spot. Not on the spot, but like in the classroom. Anyone else? Any questions? We have one more question.
To ask one question.
Hi, Pablo. Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Quintanilla. I heard that you teach 90-minute block classes.
I do.
Would you have any recommendations, best practices for those of us who also teach a world language 2 days a week and we want more proficiency in our students?
Is it 45 minutes every 2 weeks, every other day?
It's 90 minutes every
other day.
Every other day, yes.
Yeah. That's kind of like what happens to me as well. So I get to do a lot. So let's say my heritage speakers class on Monday, I would do the Day of the Dead. Products, practices, and perspectives, the whole reading, the whole, they have to come up. Let me see if I can share really quickly. They have to, on chart paper, they do this. Where is it? Oh, sorry. Oh, on chart paper, how do I, oh, I got into, okay, good. Sorry. On chart paper, they'll do this. Where is it? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. On chart paper, they do this, right? They do this for both. So on one day, they can do just the Day of the Dead, the whole 90 minutes where you do your input, the students are talking to each other, interpersonal, they're presenting. And then on Wednesday, if you see them Wednesday, then you can do all Guatemala. And then on Friday, and then the next week, they can record themselves. That could be one way to go about it. So I would say I could do one tradition in 1 week and the other tradition the following week, and then they get to record themselves the following week. Because input it shouldn't take that long input. It should just be maybe 10 minutes of mini lessons. The kids tune out after 10 minutes, maybe less than that, of course. But most of the group work is where I want them to spend a lot of time interacting with each other and then presenting what it is that they found. Because hopefully there's more than one practice, so they all get to hear different practices. For this presentation, it was more like, it was more concise as to what the practices were, but you can come up with different practices for them. I would say 90 minutes for one tradition and 90 minutes for the other tradition, and then recording.
Thank you.
All right, it's 1:45, everyone. It looks like the code is already there, and you have my email if you have any questions. So have a wonderful afternoon. See ya. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
I don't see the quote,
I don't
excuse
see
me.
the code.
It's already
It's in the
there,
chat.
the
It's in the
chat.
I got it now.
It's not, I requested
Yeah.
twice.
It's in the chat.
So
Can you resend it, please?
Yes, hold on 1 second. I'll just ask Jamie if you can post a Padlet link. I do want everyone to record
Oh,
one
yes.
thing, one takeaways from this presentation. I hope you all at least learn take one thing from this
Yeah,
presentation
let's
to
wait for
home.
the chat, for the Padlet. Yeah, that's a good question. I
Let
mean, a
me
good
just
suggestion.
post it
Oh, there's the
here.
Padlet. Okay.
Yeah, so I
You
just
guys can
showed.
go there and post some remaining questions that we didn't get to or any takeaways from the presentation. Yeah, thank you.
1 second, I have, I'm trying to get the code. Please. Give me 1 second.
They keep on moving it.
This is the code, it started with R3.
Yes, that's
Okay,
the code.
that's the code. Okay,
Maria, I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Will we see you for testing at Francis Lewis?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Definitely see you there.
Just making sure. All right,
Yes.
thank you. You've been very instrumental, very helpful.
Thank
So,
you.
say
Definitely.
hi, thank you.
Thank you,
I can't find the code.
It's R3K28E.
R3K2.
I just put it there.
8E as in Eddie.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's in the
Hi,
chat.
Maria. Do you share your PowerPoint?
Yes, I will share it. Jill, the organizer, would put everything in one document and all the presenters would share everything.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all. I'm gonna close the room. If you have further questions, please feel free to email multilingual learners at
Yes.
school.nyc.
I have a
Put them in the
question. Are
Padlet.
you sending to school the attendance? Or we have to put the code in some?
You punch the code yourself. You record yourself attendance.
Yeah, excuse me, I have been having a lot of trouble trying to
Yes, me
put
too.
in the code.
Me
For
too.
all sessions. I have not been
Me
able
too.
to submit nothing yet.
No, I wasn't able to do it either.
For all
Please-
sessions, I have yet to put
yes.
in my attendance, and I've been here since 8:25.
Okay, please email multilingual learners at school.nyc.gov.
I'm sorry.
They'll-
Can you put that in the chat?
Yes, I will.
Thank you so much. And yes, I was very concerned about that because every time I go to put in the code, I get an error code saying that the error code says your changes were not saved. The attendance code does not match.
Someone should be able to help you with that.
Please do, because I've been
please
here ever since this morning.
Yeah, I understand. Do not stress over the attendance code.
Well, I stress. I do stress.
I understand. I
So,
understand.
I
Someone
don't
will
even
help you.
able to get in there. I don't know what is going on.
I have the code for all the sessions. If you know what session you were, you will be able to find it. I can turn on my video and everybody can take a picture of this. I'm going to put it in the camera.
Okay, that's perfect. Even
Thank
though I
you
wrote
so
them down,
much.
but they still didn't work.
You
But
know,
I'll see.
you can see all this.
Oh, it's blurry. Can't see it.
Hold on, let me see if I
It is on my phone, that's why.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
have it on my
it's
no,
Could you
it's
show it again?
It's blurry.
Oh, I don't.
That's too blurry. You can't see anything.
blurry.
I can't.
Oh,
I have
make
on
it-
glasses.
That's because you have the effect on your
On my phone?